All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Uman. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Eastside. We're the East King County affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly Evergreen Health Forum. It is sponsored, of course, by Evergreen Health. You can catch our Evergreen Health Forum sessions every month on our new night, which is the last Thursday of the month. So every last Thursday, please join us. It's the new night. We used to be on Tuesday, the last Tuesday. So please join us, and I will put a link to our forum website as well in the chat in just a second so that you have a link to that. I'd also like to just remind everybody about our upcoming 2026 Youth Mental Health Conference, which is happening on March 28th at the Together Center in Redmond. And it's a great opportunity to come together to support youth mental health, hear from youth mental health leaders, join our resource fair to learn about what resources are available to folks. Zane Counseling will be joining us at the resource fair. We're really glad to have them back, as well as lots of other providers and community partners. So it's a really fun event on March 28th, again, at the Together Center. We'd love to see you there. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for tonight. We have Sherry Kaur and Sadine Al-Ziad, who are with Zane Counseling, like I mentioned. They'll be presenting on supporting your Muslim loved ones during Ramadan. Ramadan is a deeply meaningful time for many Muslims, marked by fasting, religious reflection, community, and spiritual growth. But it can also bring unique mental health considerations. So I'm excited again to welcome our presenters to talk about this really important topic and to share their insights and expertise with us. So I'd love to turn it over to Sherry and Sadine.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm Sadine once again. And then we have.
My name is Sherry Kaur. I'm a clinical counseling graduate student interning with Zane Counseling.
And I'm a bachelor intern with Zane Counseling.
We appreciate everybody taking the time this evening to come together, and thank you, Mark, for the great introduction, and NAMI Eastside for having Zane Counseling here to talk about how you can support your Muslim loved ones during Ramadan. Just a little bit about us at Zane Counseling. We are a fully telehealth practice, and we support people's capacity to grow and understand their roots. We support their emotional wellness through holistic and culturally responsive care. We hold space for curiosity, reflection, and healing. And Zane Counseling also has a lot of community-centered support and connection. We love making sure we're out in the community, working with populations who need the help and make sure that our resources are accessible across diverse populations. Before we get started into our important discussion this evening, we wanted to take a moment and highlight some of our community guidelines. During the short time that we have together this evening, we invite you to participate in whatever way feels comfortable for you. You may utilize the chat function within the Zoom. If you want to go off mic and say things verbally, you're welcome to do so as well. But as a reminder, listening also counts as participation, and we invite you to participate however feels comfortable for you. And our final community guideline before we get started this evening is to just be mindful of the diversity that exists within the Muslim community. What we will be discussing this evening is intended to be general information about Ramadan and how we can support our Muslim loved ones. And individual practices and customs may differ than how we are presenting that material to you all today. Just to kind of get us kick-started into our discussion today, feel free to use the chat or use the raise hand function to verbally participate. But do you have anyone in your life who observes Ramadan? We'll kind of give a few minutes for everybody to get settled and maybe pop some answers into the chat. students who work and observe, basically high school students. I appreciate those of you who are here to know how they can support their students and make sure that they're seen during this time. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and move forward.
Thank you guys for sharing with that question. Um, we're going to do a little Ramadan 101. So some of this might be review for you, but we want to give a brief description of Ramadan so that we're all on the same page. This year, Ramadan will start the evening of February 17th. So it's coming up actually. Um, Ramadan is the holiest month of the year because the Quran, the book of Islam, was revealed in this month. Muslims abstain from food, drink, and sex from dawn to sunset as a way to get closer to God, fostering self-control and gratitude and connection. Ramadan includes suhoor, which is a meal that people have before sunrise to prepare for the fast. It could be like a light meal that is nourishing to get you through the day. Ramadan also includes iftar, which is where Muslims break their fast when the sun sets. Many Muslims break their fast with dates because it's sunnah, and sunnah is the way of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Another aspect of Ramadan is tarawih, meaning rest or relaxation. Tarawih is a voluntary prayer performed after the evening prayer, Isha, every single night during Ramadan. This prayer is very communal, and many Muslims go and pray at the mosque. Speaking of mosques, they're a very important role during Ramadan, as many mosques host daily community iftars and have Taraweeh prayers. At the end of the month, Muslims will celebrate the end of Ramadan with Eid al-Fitr, which includes a morning prayer, charitable giving, visiting family and friends, and much more. Overall, it's a time for gratitude and community. I gave a very brief introduction, but what questions do you guys have after hearing this introduction about Ramadan? Feel free to put it in the chat or to go off mute. And at any moment during the presentation, feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand. We're happy to answer them as well. But if you guys don't have any questions, we can also move on to our next slide.
This next portion, if you have a mobile phone available, or if it's easier for you to just pop the answer in chat, we invite you to answer this question of what are some common misconceptions about Ramadan that you know of, or it could just be things in general about Ramadan that you still are not familiar with or need some more elaboration on. Michelle, you said, is there anything we can do to support in the workplace? I love that question, and I'm going to bank it because we do cover this just a little bit later.
There's a question of who participates. Are there age guidelines? We do also mention this later in the presentation, but to give you a brief answer, people like children obviously don't have to participate. Um, Adults participate, and we'll talk more about this later as well.
Yeah, we'll go into the specifics, but in general, if it is an adult able-bodied, they participate in the fast. We'll just give just like another minute to see if we get any other misconceptions or questions before we move on to our next slide here.
We have somebody put in the Slido that a common misconception is that it is a sacrifice.
Mm. Thank you for everyone who used the Slido or put their comments in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and move on. These are a few of the misconceptions that commonly come up during the month of Ramadan, and I'm going to go right into the first one, which is not even water. This is probably the most common misconception that is brought up during this time. And yes, Muslims completely abstain from food and water from sunrise to sunset. This is also a time of intention for Muslims to abstain from behaviors that are considered to be the sins of the tongue in Islam, such as gossiping, lying, speaking ill of others, arguing, and those kinds of things.
And then the next one is fasting is harmful to health. Fasting during Ramadan allows the digestive system to rest, and studies have shown that fasting can reduce stress, prevent chronic illness, improve mood, and enhance mental alertness. But it's also important to note that the elderly, children, pregnant, or nursing women, those who are menstruating, and people who are sick, and are all exempt from fasting. And another one is Ramadan is only about fasting. While fasting is a big part of Ramadan, it is not, it is so much more than just that. It includes self-reflection, charity, communal praying, reading the Quran, and so much more. If you are supporting somebody who's exempt for fasting, they're still able to participate in Ramadan by doing the things that I just mentioned.
Another thing I wanted to mention about maybe the exemptions for fasting is also if somebody maybe has a history of an eating disorder as well, that would fall under the category of maybe not physically able to participate in the fast, and therefore they can still participate in Ramadan without fasting in those ways, like giving to charity and those kinds of things. The next misconception is that it's disrespectful to eat or drink around Muslims during Ramadan. I can understand where this misconception is coming from, but eating in front of a person who is fasting during Ramadan is not considered to be disrespectful. One of the main takeaways, the personal takeaways from Ramadan is to practice self-restraint and patience. And some Muslims also believe that restraining yourself from eating or drinking while others around them are not fasting actually increases the reward of their fast, and it strengthens one's ability to be patient. And another misconception is Muslims fast so that they know what it is like to be poor. Um, that is very far from the truth. Muslims fast to increase their God consciousness, to strengthen their relationship with God. Did we go over some misconceptions that maybe others have heard of before?
I think that we kind of went over the misconception that was put into the Slido that it is a sacrifice. I would reframe it and say it's to be more intentional and it's to increase your God consciousness.
Okay. Now, we've gone over some common misconceptions, and we are now going to go into the different emotional and mental dimensions of Ramadan. We're going to start with the negative emotional and mental health dimensions during Ramadan. So, first one is disrupted sleep schedule. This is likely to come up just because the nature of the fasting from sunrise to sunset, along with the schedule of prayers, can disrupt someone's routine sleep schedule that they've had established. It also can impact nutrition with fasting, can cause lower energy levels during the day. This is especially something to be mindful of if you are abstaining from food and water and have history of an eating disorder, as participating in the fast may cause a relapse in those symptoms. So it's important to check in with those loved ones who might have that history just to make sure that they're doing it in a healthy way that isn't contributing to their symptoms. Another negative dimension is increased levels of stress. During Ramadan, the various responsibilities one has don't stop. They don't pause. Work still continues, assignments are still due, kids still need to be picked up from school. And those different ways we stretch our responsibilities can just increase the stress levels that we're dealing with. We wanted to especially highlight parental responsibilities as being one of those negative and emotional and mental health dimensions during Ramadan, because while this individual, the adult, could be fasting and going to the mosque for prayer, things like that, maybe their kids are not fasting, so they still have to keep up with those obligations as well. And probably the main negative emotional and mental health dimensions during Ramadan is the comparing of one's self worship to others. Um, this can show up in ways like not feeling like they're doing enough, not praying enough, or maybe they feel like a bad Muslim because they're not observing their fast, or even if during the day they slipped and drank water and forgot that they were fasting, the emotional weight of the mistake can be very detrimental, and it can contribute to feelings of negativity and just in general feeling like a bad Muslim.
I have something to add really quick about if you accidentally drink water, that's completely fine. Like it doesn't invalidate your fast at all. But I've had like family members or friends like have that take a big weight on them. Like how could I forget?
I think that is something that, I mean, I've even encountered with my Muslim friends that um they, drink a sip of water and it just clicks for them like, oh my goodness, like I'm supposed to be fasting. And I know some of them have felt very down and negative about it, but Islam is a religion of mercy, and those mistakes are forgiven. It's the intention behind what the individual is putting into their fast that matters more than the mistake or the forgetfulness of forgetting they were fasting.
Now we want to get into some positive emotional and mental dimensions of Ramadan. A big part of Ramadan is the increased time with community and family. Families come together and celebrate and practice traditions. This could be a great source of connection, joy, and an increase in overall well being. There's also positive health outcomes of fasting, as mentioned before, includes preventing chronic disease, improving mood, and enhancing mental alertness. Another aspect is the character building. Since you're doing a lot of self reflecting, and with fasting, it helps with self discipline. Um, you could really grow as a person. And then some Muslims use Islam as an intentional space for grounding, and some even use it as a break. An increased charity and helping others improves mood and can be a source of purpose for many. And it always feels good to give back to the community. As individuals engage in worship, reflection, and charity during Ramadan, they simultaneously nourish their mental health and enhancing their spiritual and psychological well being. We have another Slido for you guys. If you are able to take out your phone and scan this and answer in what ways have you supported Muslims as they observed Ramadan. Also, feel free to put it in the chat as well or go off mute.
I'm gonna go off mute to share some ways that I've seen. One of my friends used to work at Target as an overnight stalker, and during Ramadan, their manager, who was not Muslim, bought like Costco packages of dates so that their staff could break their fast.
That's very sweet and intentional.
I'm gonna pop in to say one more. At my workplace, I work for DSHS. During Ramadan, they have conference rooms specifically set aside that cannot be booked just for prayer, so that our staff at who are observing Ramadan have a safe and private place that they can participate in their prayers throughout the day. And I just thought that is just it is very intentional and it just lets their staff know that we see you and we support you.
Somebody on the Slido said something very similar. They said reserving rooms for students for prayer. And there is time off whenever needed, acknowledge Ramadan during staff meetings. That's really beautiful. And there's another one saying providing mental health support to someone who felt like a bad Muslim and who is often sleep deprived at school. Those are all great ways to support Muslims as they observe Ramadan. We will also, we have some suggestions to give you guys. Um, so to support a loved one at home, ask what ways can I support you during this month? This can be a great opportunity to be in dialogue with your loved ones about their needs and wants in Ramadan. Waking up for suhoor together is another great way. It can be hard to wake up for suhoor, so waking up early together can be a great motivation. I even struggle to wake up for it. Breaking your fast together, or even helping make the iftar meal. Decorating the house for Ramadan. This can help make their space feel more festive. And as always, avoiding comparison to others. We mentioned earlier in the presentation that comparison of worship is hard, especially when someone feels like they're not doing enough for Ramadan.
And on that note, we talk about intentional ways to communicate a bit later, but with avoiding comparisons to others, it's also important to not ask the question, why aren't you fasting? Like we said, there are exemptions to fasting, and additionally, there may be Muslims out there who do not participate in fasts, and that is their own spiritual journey. And we don't want to add to maybe the ways that maybe they are internally struggling with it as well.
Absolutely. Sorry. Support your coworkers. I know this was a question in the chat earlier, so now we're answering it for you. Wish your coworkers a Ramadan Mubarak or Ramadan Kareem or simply Happy Ramadan. It is a kind way of showing your support. Be flexible with scheduling. Allow for short breaks for rest or prayer. Be mindful of the energy fluctuations and avoid unnecessary late day meetings. Also, incorporating ways to connect with staff that are not food centered. Perhaps do check ins as a walk instead of a coffee chat. Another important one is to provide a safe and quiet space for prayer. And it makes my heart so happy to hear that a lot of you guys have been doing that, especially in school settings.
Practical ways to show care in the community. In general, lead with curiosity. Ask questions, and don't make assumptions. This avoids misconceptions and shows genuine care and support for our Muslim loved ones. And another big one is to hold space for this person without a need to fix it. Support for our Muslim friends and loved ones does not mean that we approach their struggles through a religious lens. Sometimes it means just showing up and listening and just validating, like, yeah, that sounds really hard, or I'm sorry that you're feeling that way right now. Sometimes there's a tendency to maybe use language that seems kind of like a solution, but it isn't. Like, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you hear like, oh, it's just a month. It's okay. You got this. It's just a month. But that's kind of invalidating what that person might be struggling with in the moment. And when we say hold space without needing to fix it, we're just saying this is a tough month, but you're persevering, and I see you, and I can see your efforts. This is our intentional communication. Our focus when communicating should be to validate their experience and their struggle without minimizing it. So, like I mentioned before, that language of, it's just a month, push through it is invalidating. If that person is struggling with energy levels, if they're struggling with maybe internal conflict of not feeling like a good Muslim, just saying it's just a month, push through it doesn't really validate their experience. It minimizes how they're feeling. Another one is at least it's Ramadan, you should be happy. Um, it is a month of self-growth, of personal reflection, and it can be a very happy time for some. But for others, what about if that individual does not have a sense of community? I'm sure it's not a very happy time for them to invalidate that experience. And especially if they've voiced their isolation to you, it just kind of makes them feel a little bit worse. But how do we fix that, right? We want to make sure the language that we're using is supportive and validating. So it makes sense that you're tired. And even you don't have to be okay all of the time. Mental health and spiritual growth can happen at the same time, and it does not have to be at the cost of one or the other. Somebody can still be struggling with their mental health during Ramadan, and it is especially important to make sure we're validating that experience and not just relating it back to maybe just your energy's low because you're fasting. Those two things can happen at the same time. See in the chat, the yikes. Yeah, these are comments that people have said, right? So, are there any maybe statements that um, you've heard somebody speaking to someone who's Muslim, or maybe even ones that you might have used unintentionally, not realizing that it was minimizing experiences?
I think one that I hear a lot within the Muslim community is, oh, so and so is only a Ramadan Muslim, or like meaning that, oh, they only practice in Ramadan. But it's like everybody's on their own journey, and you should be happy that they're, practicing and doing what they can. And I feel like those comments discourage people from practicing the way that they want to practice.
Very, very true. We wanted to open up this space for maybe just general discussion or questions that might have popped up that we didn't get to as we went through. Or in general, if you would like to share something that you've learned today that you can take away from this, we would love to hear it as well.
We have in
Routines.
the chat,
Oh,
seeing the communication tip is so helpful. Beyond this, if a non-Muslim is invited to iftar dinner, what should I do or not do to be respectful and add to the evening? Yes. Okay. I think if you are hoping to bring something and making sure that the food is halal, so like halal is kind of like kosher. Things that are not halal are pork or anything that has like pork in it, like gelatin and stuff like that. Um, but honestly, like just be yourself. Iftar dinners are honestly just like any other dinner. Yeah, hope
that's a
that answers
wonderful
the question.
question, by the way. Are there differences in Ramadan practices across different Muslim communities that we should be aware of?
I feel like every community practice differently because it is a diverse Muslim community. Um, I'm not aware of like major differences. I think like some people like break their fast with like lentil soup and dates. Other people, they make sure they break their fast with like samosas and stuff like that. But like the basics of it, like fasting from sunrise to sunset is pretty standard. Um, yeah, and the Tarawih prayers are pretty standard as well.
That is a great question, though. I know that there might be like differences in obviously like meals because the Muslim community is so diverse, so what they're using to break their fast is different. It's also really beautiful to see how non-Muslim communities also support Muslim loved ones during this time too, and kind of taking their culture into account and like the Target manager bringing dates in. I think that that's so beautiful.
I just remembered a slight difference between the different sects of Islam. So Sunni Muslims, they typically like fast slightly shorter days, whereas Shia Muslims, they wait until the sun is completely down to break their fast. So like, and that's like slight, like maybe 10-minute difference.
Um, there are also slight differences in areas where sunrise and sunset are not as apparent. So if you are like up north in Alaska or down super south in Antarctica, and in those situations, I believe they choose the closest time zone in which it is observable to participate in their fast and know when the times for prayer are as well. This question, what ideas do you have for supporting high school students who might be coming to school sleep deprived after interrupted sleep for prayer and the pre-dawn meal? That is a really great question. My answer is I think it would kind of depend on what age they are. If it's, high school or middle school, or you have a little bit more sway with like the scheduling, maybe not making very intensive subjects like right off the bat, intensive check-ins, those kinds of things. Kind of takes them a minute to get into it, but I think that it is important to still normalize their experience as if it is with their other peers. It is one thing to acknowledge that there will be some fluctuating energy levels. But if they are older, maybe they have been fasting for some time and they have their own strategies and they kind of recognize how to show up in the spaces that they need to show up with that might be more energy intensive. Now, if it is younger students, that might be just a little bit of a different story because maybe it's their first time they're fasting, the first time they're participating in Ramadan. So just holding them with grace and recognizing that, okay, they're not acting out, they're not being irritable, they're not doing this and this because they're in a bad mood or anything. It's just they have been up very early and they're not used to this and just kind of handling it with understanding and letting them find their way. Sadine, did you have anything else to?
You're like just having a conversation with the student, being like, I know you're practicing Ramadan, and I see that you have been sleep deprived. Thank you for being here. Like, it takes a lot to just come to school too, just kind of um, like congratulating them and showing that you see their effort that they're putting in. Um, yeah, those are really good suggestions, Sherry.
Were there any lingering thoughts or questions that we could address? Just give it a couple more minutes. We appreciate everyone for being here and spending the evening with us. We appreciate NAMI Eastside for having Zane Counseling here again, and we look forward to what other ways we can contribute and help. That being said, here are some resources. ZaneCounseling.com if you're looking for a new therapist. We also have Crisis Line 988, National Crisis Line, and the Crisis Connections down at the bottom. And thank you all so much for sharing the evening with us. We hope that you are able to take a bit of wisdom and spread it amongst your Muslim loved ones and friends. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you guys because you guys are so amazing.
Thank you so much, Sherry and Sadine.